Hi, and welcome to the June 2024 edition of Upfront and Real, brought to you by Ohio Cooperative Living Magazine. I'm Karen Whitney, Director of Communications, and with me today, our President and CEO, Pat O'Loughlin, here for a special edition. We're going to be talking about the EPA power plant rules that were put in place back in May. We've already started our fight against these rules. I should say your injury is not from that fight, to be clear for our viewers. But this is really important. This is really going to impact the cooperative members across Ohio, but actually across the country. So let's, in summary, explain to folks what these new EPA power plant rules are asking of plants like Cardinal Plant and coal plants across the country.
Yeah, that's a good place to start, Karen. Thanks. So the EPA, under the current administration, has been threatening to put out rules to reduce carbon from power plants for several months, even years now. And we just saw those rules in the last couple of weeks. They have been more extreme and unrealistic than we expected. They are requiring power plants to reduce their carbon dioxide emissions by 90% by using technology that's never been employed at that level that they're requiring it. And then we are supposed to not only capture this carbon dioxide, but also then permanently place it underground in some kind of a storage area that doesn't exist at this time. And we're all supposed to get all that done by the early 2030s. So it's a rule that just is unrealistic, it's unachievable, and we believe it's also unlawful, that the Clean Air Act was never intended to regulate carbon in this way. It was never intended to require unproven technologies to be forced onto industry. And unfortunately, they're trying to require us to do something that's simply impossible. Here
in Ohio, how much of the power that's produced to give us our electricity for cooperative members and some of the IOUs, investor-owned utility companies, that purchase power from us, how much of that power comes from coal?
Okay, so today in Ohio, there's 4 remaining coal-fired power plants. Just as recent as 2009, we had as many as 21. So it's gone down substantially over the last several years, mostly because other utilities were unwilling to make the investments in environmental control equipment that we've made to be able to control all types of emissions, both air, water, solid waste, ash, waste, groundwater, you name it. We've done things to address all of the above, and at quite an expense, so that we can have one of the cleanest coal-burning power plants in the world, because we still need coal to be part of our energy mix. So today, Cardinal is nearly 10% of the electricity produced in Ohio. Along with the other coal plants, it's a little more than 30% of our electricity comes from coal here in Ohio. Ohio today has become a net importer, though, of electricity because of the shutdown that we've seen in so many plants. We have added some natural gas, we've added some solar and some wind over the last decade or so, which has chipped away at that, but we're still producing far less electricity today than we used to. And now on top of that comes these new set of rules that are aimed specifically, I believe, at forcing coal plants to close down because there's no real way to achieve the levels of reductions that they've asked us to do. So that's really a problem, because today we're experiencing growth in demand from homes and businesses that are electrifying things, from electric cars that are being added to our grid, and largely now from large data centers and AI-based technologies that are requiring increases in electric demand that we've rarely seen in our history. So we're seeing this big increase in demand at the same time that supply is being decreased, and now EPA proposes to push it down even further. And it's just going to be a problem for businesses and families, not only here in Ohio, but across the country, because the same thing can be said in every state. We have different balances of how much coal we use versus other resources. We happen to have more coal in Ohio than many states, but today coal still provides about 20% of US electricity, and that's going to essentially go away if this rule is allowed to stay in place.
20% is a lot. So what is the EPA suggesting or recommending that this 20% be replaced with? What to produce that power?
Well, it's interesting. They don't seem to have to worry about that. They have not done any reliability impact analysis. So that's just up to the rest of the world to figure it out. But they haven't really given us any good options, because another part of this rule not only is going to force coal plants to close, but it's going to prevent us from building baseload natural gas plants that might be able to replace them, because they're requiring the same kind of carbon technology on new natural gas plants that they're asking us to put on coal plants. And frankly, the same problems exist for new natural gas plants. We don't have the technology. We don't have the way to capture it at the levels they want, and we don't have the ways to store it permanently as they're requiring under this rule. So we're not only are we going to have to shut down coal, we're not going to be able to replace it with natural gas.
Which has been the preferred thing that they've pushed us to in the past,
Yeah.
natural gas. So how do we replace that 20%? Where would we go in Ohio?
So, the non-carbon emitting resources that are out there would include wind and solar, which we are continuing to increase and will increase, but they can't supply all of our needs because of the nature of wind and solar, that we get it only when it's sunny or windy, and that it has cycles and days where we don't get any. The other non-emitting resource is hydro, which has largely been exploited across the U.S. There's very few remaining large dams or anything else that we could get more hydro from. And the last one is nuclear, which also is a carbon-free resource. It's suffered some setbacks in recent times, but it could be a source. But the development time from today to site and plan a nuclear power plant, actually build it and get it licensed and operating, is probably around 20 years today. So we've got to find a way, if that's the path we go down, we've still got to find a way to bridge this roughly 20-year period to have a baseload resource we can rely on. Or, through innovation, we might invent something new that we don't know about today, but you can't count on that. That'll happen whenever it happens.
Pat, what do you see happening come 2032? What do you believe our realistic situation is going to be at that time?
What I think is the most likely thing is that we're going to spend the next few years in court fighting this EPA rule, and I think that we will be successful, just like we were. The Clean Power Plan was actually less egregious than the current rule that's been proposed. It took several years, but the Supreme Court ultimately found that rule to be unlawful. I believe this one to be even more unlawful, so it's likely that we'll reach a similar outcome and this rule won't be able to be put in place by EPA. But we don't know that. We just, and I'm certainly not a lawyer, but just looking at the track record, that looks like the way this is going to go. What I do know is we're going to be forced to spend precious time and resources in court opposing a rule that's unrealistic and unachievable. And we haven't even talked about cost yet. But if we were to try to do this, any replacement of electricity is going to cost a lot more than what we're doing today. So there's that too. But we never even get to cost if we can't do it at all.
Right. And I think it's important to note here, doing what's right for the environment has always been a top priority for Buckeye Power, for Ohio's electric cooperatives, and many of the cooperatives across the country. But it's not put above reliability and affordability. So this isn't about us not wanting to do what's good for the environment. This is trying to find a balance and putting reliability and affordability first.
Right. We've always said safe, reliable, affordable, and environmentally responsible. That's our goals for our electric supply. But we have to keep them in that order of priority too. It's got to be safe. It's got to be reliable because people depend on us, not just for their economic well-being, but for their safety and security. It's got to be affordable because we serve all kinds of people, including many low-income members of co-ops. And then finally, we make it as environmentally responsible as we can within those other constraints. And we've been doing that for decades, and we're going to continue to do that.
So Pat, you mentioned that this lawsuit has been filed by 27 states to try to stay these rules from the EPA. What is the next step? Yeah,
so we're in a process through the court system where we'll first attempt to get a stay, meaning that EPA will not be able to make this rule go into effect from the courts. That'll be the first step. We were successful under the Clean Power Plan in achieving that stay, which takes the pressure off industry to meet these deadlines in this short period of time. So we're hopeful that will happen. And then after that stay, we still have to have an adjudication of the rule itself. Is it lawful or not? A stay just means, hold on, we're not sure. Then we actually have to have a lawsuit to determine the legality of this rule. We think we'll be successful in that as well, but that's likely to take years.
Okay. So this isn't something that's going to be addressed overnight? It
is not. And at the same time, the clock is ticking. People are depending on us to come up with electricity. There are compliance deadlines in this rule. So there are a lot of hazards for our electric industry and the reliability and affordability of our electricity supply while we go through this process. That's why a stay is so important, because it puts things on hold and gives us time to sort it out.
What can our cooperative members watching this episode do to help in protecting the reliability of their electricity and the affordability of it?
Well, I think the number one thing is to make sure that your elected officials realize how important reliable and affordable electricity is to you as a member consumer, and how important it is that we balance out this environmental responsibility with affordability and reliability so that we get to the right answer to serve the people that we need to serve. So letting your elected officials know so that they can put some pressure on the administration to change course, which they can always decide to do. And then largely it's going to be up to the courts, which most of us can't do much about other than hire lawyers and make sure that we provide the best and most honest assessment of these rules that we can.
So I have to bring this up because I've heard this question get asked. We have a major election coming up, presidential election in November. Does a change in administration stop all of this? Does it stop this rule or not?
It does not. We've been through this before in other environmental rules where a change in administration can change direction and ultimately may result in a change in that rule, but that is an administrative process that will also take years. So unfortunately, we are probably years away from knowing how this is going to turn out. And as I said before, we're going to have to spend our time, our resources to try to oppose what we think is unrealistic and unlawful to get to a better solution that works for people like the members of our electric cooperatives.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you sitting down and explaining this and talking to everyone. We appreciate you watching, educating yourself, and staying informed. And of course, we'll be here all along the way for this EPA rule fight to bring you updates on the status.
Yeah, and thank you all for your support of your electric cooperative. It's important what we do. We know it's important to you, and we're going to continue to do what we've always done, which is provide reliable, affordable, environmentally responsible electricity in the best way that we can.
All right. Thank you, Pat. Thank you for watching.